welcome. You've found your way to a quiet corner of the past. Here, the ticking of clocks and the flicker of lab flames have slowed. Tonight, you'll be drifting through the long and winding story of how humans first began to ask what the world was made of. Long before laboratory beakers and periodic tables, before goggles and gloves and the strict rules of modern science, there were those who mixed and melted, who chanted and calculated, people who stared into flames, tasted ash, and tried to coax the mysteries of matter into the light. What they found was never quite chemistry, and never quite magic. It was something between. They believed that fire, earth, water, and air were more than just materials. They were principles, forces, even spirits. And by understanding these invisible forces, they thought perhaps the world itself might be persuaded to reveal its secrets. In the hours ahead, we'll drift through incense-thick halls and ink-stained manuscripts. We'll meet quiet experimenters, wandering seekers, and those who dared to promise the impossible: eternal life, gold from stone, and pure understanding. As always, there's nothing you need to do now. Just listen. In Alexandria. It is the 2nd century of our common era, and the city, once ruled by the Ptolemies, still hums with the breath of many cultures. Greek, Egyptian, Roman, Jewish, and Babylonian ideas intermingle here like colored smoke in still air. Or let your mind drift. The windows are small slits, keeping most of the light at bay. A deliberate design to preserve the secrets and the substances stored within. Let us begin. You inhale slowly, not because it is pleasant, but because it is necessary. Many of your materials are reactive, volatile, even dangerous in the wrong combination. Not quite a physician. Others are instructions, passed down in obscure texts, full of allegory and mystery. These are the words of Zosimos, of Panopolis, Mary the Jewess, perhaps even Democritus, or at least someone writing under his name. Imagine yourself in a quiet chamber, the sun barely breaking over the rooftops of Alexandria. Some you've crushed yourself using a mortar carved of basalt, worn smooth over years of repetition. It is filled with a cloudy liquid, and a fine sediment rests at the bottom. You are waiting for a reaction. You do not know exactly what it will be. That is part of the work. The rhythm of it is comforting, a slow, steady sound, like a heartbeat against the stone. The stone walls around you are cool to the touch, though they will warm soon with the rising heat of the day. You are an alchemist, not quite a priest, not quite a philosopher, sometimes ours. Sailors unload amphorae of oil and wine, while vendors prepare their stalls along the stone roads. You hear the call of a coppersmith, the bleating of a goat, the slow rhythm of a grinding wheel. You believe, as many do, in a principle called sympathia, that all things in the universe are connected, and by changing one thing, another may follow. And yet, in your small way, a bit of all three. You recite words, draw symbols in ash, wait for auspicious times, determined by the stars. Conversation about your work is rare, sometimes discouraged. Too many ears, too many interpretations, too much risk. Alchemy is not always legal, not always trusted. At times it is seen as dangerous heresy or false prophecy. At other times, it is tolerated, even respected. Your hands are stained with fine powders, ground from minerals, from dried plants, from curious rocks brought in by traders from the Nile and beyond. The parchment crackles softly beneath your fingers, another sensory constant in a life of patient repetition. In front of you, A simple flame flickers under a metal cup. The scent of myrrh and burning charcoal thickens the air. Flesh into spirit. You whisper words, not always aloud. Some are prayers to gods long since unspoken in polite company, and yet they are part of a sacred continuum. Instruments in a long tradition that stretches backward into Egypt, into Babylon, and forward, toward lands and ages you cannot yet imagine. The texts speak of transformations, of purifications, of union and separation, of dissolving the impure to find what is true. There is no clear boundary here between science and religion. There is no university here for alchemists, only guilds, temples, and the occasional private patron. Much knowledge is kept secret, passed on only to initiates, sometimes deliberately obscured, masked in riddles and metaphors, so that only the worthy may decipher it. Between technique and theology, the fire, you are told, is a divine imitator, a force of heavenly power brought down to earth, and through fire all things are revealed. You gently place a sealed vessel, a small glass ampulla, above the flame. There is no real method as we think of it today. You observe, you note, you repeat. Sometimes you wait days. So you test this not just with substances, but with gestures. It is the 8th century of the Common Era. The Caliphate stretches wide, from Spain in the west to the borders of India, and within its borders, knowledge from many lands begins to converge. You are part scientist, part mystic, part artisan. The streets are lined with low, square buildings of mud brick and stone. The scent of palm resin and lamp oil hangs in the air. In the evenings, when the winds quiet, you can hear the low hum of voices drifting from behind shaded walls, verses of poetry, lines of the Quran, and sometimes many are preserved in Arabic, others later translated into Latin under the name Geber, where they would help shape the foundations of Western alchemy. Or many, the murmur of strange, experimental instructions, and you are not alone. His name, you are told, is Jabir ibn Hayyan. These properties, inherited from Greek thought and carried through Islamic philosophy, govern the behaviors of all matter, and through careful combinations, transformations might be induced, not merely in metals, but in the soul itself. Smoke rises in steady streams from small clay furnaces called alembic, a word that would later become alembic in the Latin world. His approach is more systematic. He speaks of quantities, ratios, procedures to be followed and tested. A solution of vitriol, perhaps, heated until its sharp essence condenses out, forming what we would later call sulfuric acid. The tools are simple but refined: coiled tubes for condensing vapor, crucibles for melting metals, and everywhere, the hum of observation, or perhaps in his own personal workspace, far from official eyes. Across Alexandria, in other shadowed rooms, others like you stir and distill and contemplate. Outside, the city begins to stir. The harbor, filled with ships of cedar and flax, yawns under the morning sun. But in your chamber, time moves differently. You are watching something curdle and shift inside the flask. A bubbling, a new color, a layer separating. A place not just of science, but of spiritual alignment. That the name was a pen name, a cipher for a school of thinkers operating under the Abbasid court. But beneath the layers of myth lies something quieter, something calmer. Others believe he was a real person, a student of the famed Jafar al-Sadiq, a Shia imam and scholar. The smoke that rises is both chemical and symbolic. The metals are not just metals, they are mirrors for the soul. That observations must be written down, not merely remembered or revealed. You record it with a stylus on a sheet of parchment, using letters borrowed from Greek and symbols all your own. At noon, you may break for a meal, perhaps olives and lentils, a little bread. You eat quietly, often alone. It derives from Greek kamea, and perhaps from the ancient name for Egypt, Kem, the land of black soil, where transformation was believed to begin. The philosopher's task, or the chemist's, lanterns are lit in the streets. A breeze stirs the palm leaves, but inside, the glow of coals continues. A flask is gently rotated. A thin layer of residue is scraped into a small copper dish, a universal solvent, an elixir of longevity. But what he records is more grounded. Acids, salts, gases, each with properties, tendencies, reactions, lead into gold. A symbolic framework, yes, but one that would shape centuries of alchemical theory to come, or the simple transformation of ignorance into knowledge. The tools on your table are modest, vessels of clay and glass, bronze tongs, a thin blade for scraping residue. The sun climbs higher, the smoke hangs in slow curls, then fades. The lab grows quiet. The notes are set aside, carefully rolled and wrapped in cloth. The scent in the room changes as the experiment continues. He writes of spirits in materials of bodies and souls within metals. Yet behind the poetry lies a subtle clarity, an attempt to classify, to organize, to explain. You note it, a slightly sour tinge, like vinegar, left too long in the sun. A small reaction, not dramatic, not golden. Move gently forward once more, but real. And that, for today, is enough. You lean back. The shadows begin to change direction. You stretch your fingers, breathe the warming air, and prepare the next mixture. Your life is not one of dramatic discovery or fame. It is a rhythm of heat and substance, of question and result. And in that rhythm, you find a kind of quiet purpose, just as now. You listen, you breathe, and we continue onward. The world grows broader now. We leave the Mediterranean shores and travel eastward through wind-blown deserts and cities that glitter with libraries and quiet courtyards. Imagine the city of Kufa in present-day Iraq. Somewhere within these streets, in a modest building away from the bustle, a man moves carefully through shadows and smoke. And yet even this name is uncertain. Was Jabir a real man, a single mind, or a legacy built from generations of thought? The answer may be lost to time, but the works attributed to him remain. Hundreds of texts filled with experiments, formulas, and visions. But for now, imagine him here in the lab known simply as the Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. The air is thick with vapor. Jabir, or the man writing as Jabir, is not interested in magic spells or secret prayers. Yet the mystical is never far away. In his writings, Jabir speaks of the balance of four natures: hot, cold, moist, and dry. His experiments include early forms of crystallization, sublimation, and, most famously, distillation. You picture him now, watching as a clear liquid drips slowly through a coiled glass tube. The smell is acrid, stinging. He waves it away gently, his eyes focused. The process is slow. Days may pass between each phase of the experiment. There is no sense of urgency, only method, only rhythm. He records what he observes, measures the weight of what remains, adjusts, repeats again and again. Some substances, he finds, behave unpredictably. Others follow patterns, which he notes with care. He believes deeply that all matter has a hidden nature, and that this nature can be uncovered through purification. Tactless, a word meaning refinement or liberation. And so the lab becomes a kind of sanctuary. You can imagine him by lamplight, writing in the margins of his notebooks. The purpose of alchemy is not merely to transmute metals, but to transform the self. Yet, as with all things in history, clarity fades into uncertainty. There are those who say Jabir ibn Hayyan never lived. His identity is cloaked in legend. His works attributed with wonders, elixirs, transmutations, powders that burn blue and gold, the emergence of procedure, the birth of the laboratory. For in Jabir's texts, we find something rare, the idea that knowledge is built, that experiments should be repeated. It is not modern chemistry, but it is its ancestor. Even the word alchemy itself, alchemy, is Arabic in form, though older in root. Outside the lab, Kufa hums with the slow pace of evening. There is no great discovery tonight, only the slow, persistent movement of understanding, step by step. Perhaps Jabir dreams of perfection, a substance pure beyond corruption. His language is strange to us now. He writes that mercury and sulfur are the parents of all metals, that their balance determines the nature of silver, gold, iron. He may not have known modern chemical bonds, but he understood that matter could change, and change, he believed, was the key to everything. As the lamps dim and the fire cools, the last drops of distilled vapor fall into the collecting vessel. The night returns to stillness, and we let the smoke clear and the air settle. Now we travel farther, across centuries and continents, to where the dream of transformation begins to shift its shape, becoming not only a pursuit of understanding, but a quest, almost a pilgrimage, toward something eternal. Picture a quiet cell in a medieval monastery. A candle sputters, casting flickering light across a heavy wooden desk. The pages of a thick manuscript lie open, scrawled in Latin and crowded with illustrations, suns and moons, serpents and flasks, kings crowned in gold. It is the 13th century, perhaps in southern France, or Italy, or beyond. The walls are thick with lime plaster. The outside world is hushed beneath layers of stone and prayer. Here, the alchemist is no longer only a technician of the elements. He is a seeker of divine transformation. This is the age of the philosopher's stone, a symbol, a substance, a miracle, said to grant immortality, said to transmute base metals into noble ones, said to perfect what was imperfect, not only in the world, but in the self. Imagine the soft scratch of quill on parchment, the slow turning of pages, and the quiet rustle of robes as the alchemist paces beside his furnace, thinking deeply not only of minerals, but of the soul's long journey through imperfection. In these centuries, from the Latin West to Persia, from India to China, alchemy became more than an experimental craft. It became a spiritual philosophy. Let us begin with a central idea, that all matter is composed of two fundamental principles, mercury and sulfur, not quite the substances as we know them today, but archetypes. Mercury was the principle of fluidity, brightness, and volatility. It was the soul, luminous, evasive, constantly in motion. Sulfur was the principle of fire, fixity, and burning. Gold was the perfect balance. Lead, the most flawed. But because all metals were made from the same basic essence, they could, in theory, be transformed with time, with purification, with the correct spiritual and chemical operations. The spirit, the energy that drove transformation. Practitioners swallowed it in minute quantities, mixed it with sulfur, processed it in sacred ways, not to make gold, but to reach moksha, liberation. According to this worldview, all metals were formed by different proportions of these two forces. In Taoist traditions, internal and external alchemy blurred. The furnace of the laboratory mirrored by the furnace of the body, with breath, energy, and spirit refined like a substance in a crucible. This belief traveled far. In India, alchemical traditions reached back even earlier. Through the Rasayana practices, the science of essence, transformation, and rejuvenation. Here, mercury too was central, called rasa, and believed to have powerful, even divine, properties. Some of their efforts, tragically, led to mercury poisoning. But the goal was always higher than mere physical reward. It was alignment with the Tao, the unspoken, eternal way. In China, the alchemists worked with cinnabar, red mercury sulfide, believing it to be the key to immortality. They constructed elaborate systems of elixirs and elemental cycles, of planetary alignments and bodily transformations, and a mystical event. The Chinese Dan Dao alchemists heated minerals in sealed vessels, crafted pills known as golden elixir, and meditated for hours in pursuit of harmony between heaven and earth. Back in Europe, in the candlelit libraries of medieval abbeys, the works of Arabic and Persian alchemists, including Jabir, were translated and studied with fevered attention. Scholars like Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, and later Arnold of Villanova and Nicholas Flamel, whether real, legendary, or somewhere in between, carried these ideas forward. They filled their pages with elaborate metaphors. The sun and the moon represented gold and silver, the red king and white queen, sulfur and mercury. The union of opposites, the conjuncio, was both a chemical operation. Imagine a manuscript filled with layers of meaning, a green lion devouring the sun, a black crow perched above a skull, a dragon biting its own tail, the Ouroboros, the symbol of eternal return. Each image is more than symbolic. It is instructional, meditative, and secret. The philosopher's stone, in this worldview, was not merely a material object. It was the result of long labor, purification, and enlightenment. Some said it was a red powder, others a translucent crystal. Some said it could heal all illness, perfect all matter. Others whispered it was the divine spark within the human being, awakened through contemplation and craft. The process to reach it was called the magnum opus, the great work. It began with nigredo, blackening, the breaking down of matter and ego, a symbolic death, then albedo, whitening, the washing and purification of the spirit. Then citronetus, yellowing, the awakening of inner light. And finally, rubedo, reddening, the completion, the perfection, the birth of gold. The fire in the furnace mirrored the fire of transformation in the alchemist's own soul. You picture him or her. 4 women practiced alchemy too, often in secret, watching the color of a mixture shift slowly over hours. Not with the sharp eye of a chemist, but with the patient gaze of a pilgrim. In the corners of these ancient labs, you would not hear the clang of machines or the call of assistants. Only the soft sounds of boiling, dripping, breathing, the creak of leather-bound books, the rustle of robes, and the faint scent of sulfur and oil. No moment of triumph, no golden coin emerging from the flame, only process and intention and silence. These were the invisible forces at work. Not electromagnetic fields or molecular bonds, but dreams of harmony, balance, and eternal truth. We look back now and smile at the naivety, lead into gold, mercury as a cure, elixirs of life. And yet, beneath it all, something real was stirring. The idea that the universe was ordered, that by understanding its parts, one could glimpse the whole, that matter could be changed. As the night deepens and the candles burn low, the alchemist closes the manuscript, wraps the crucible in linen, and retreats into the stillness of the chamber. Tomorrow, the fire will begin again. Tomorrow, more transformation, slow, quiet, invisible, and now we drift gently forward once more. Servants sweep and polish, the rustle of fabric echoing through the hall of mirrors. Now the world brightens. We step forward again into a different kind of alchemy. One no longer cloaked in shadows or sealed behind monastery walls, but practiced under chandeliers and within palaces, refined, codified, displayed. It is the 17th century Europe stirs with new ideas. The mystical glow of alchemy is beginning to fade, replaced slowly by what we now call science, but not entirely. In the court of kings and queens, the old dreams remain, reshaped by fashion, spectacle, and ambition. Imagine yourself now at Versailles, under the rule of Louis XIV, the Sun King. The air is heavy with perfume. Courtiers move through gilded galleries, and in a wing just beyond the gardens, discreetly removed from the royal eye, a laboratory hums to life. Here, behind delicate curtains and among marble floors, the apothecaries of the elite prepare their powders, tinctures, and oils, not in pursuit of gold or eternal youth, not quite, but to serve the court, to protect, to entertain, to heal, and occasionally to poison. This is a different kind of chemistry, practical, elegant, political. The line between medicine and magic is still blurred, but the language is shifting. Words like essence, spirit, and humor give way to compound, solvent, and reaction. Yet the atmosphere remains heady with enchantment. Let us begin, as always, with the rhythms of daily life. In these royal apothecaries, both in France and England, the workday begins before dawn. Mortars are prepared, herbs are steeped, glassware is polished with linen cloths. The recipe books, handwritten and jealously guarded, are opened with careful hands. You picture an apothecary now in a high-collared coat, adjusting a brass alembic above a low flame. He's distilling lavender water for a noblewoman's bath. Beside him, a young apprentice stirs a cooling syrup of lemon, honey, and powdered pearls, a tonic for the queen's morning cough. The tools are polished, often engraved. There are rosewood cabinets lined with labeled vials, pewter spoons and ivory spatulas, conical flasks, and sealed crocks resting in cool stone cellars. This is chemistry as craft, an intersection of pharmacology, perfume, metallurgy, and ceremony. Some apothecaries work in the open. Their shops, patronized by nobility, are simply for show. Others serve behind the scenes, retained as personal physicians, chemists, or secrets. In Paris, the Jardin du Roi, the King's Garden, becomes a center of medicinal learning. Botanical knowledge grows, specimens are cataloged, and distillation becomes both an art and a science. But in Versailles, discretion is everything. The court is a theater, and so the work of the apothecary must be both effective and beautiful. Gold-flecked powders are folded into rice paper packets. Lozenges are hand-pressed into flower shapes. Tinctures glisten in crystal decanters, placed beside mirrors and silks. Some cures are sincere, bark for fevers, oils for wounds, compounds of mercury for syphilis, though the treatment is often worse than the disease. Other creations, a drink that sparkles, a sweet that claims to improve memory, a tonic that restores harmony to the inner winds. In this world, chemistry performs, yet beneath the elegance, a quieter current flows. Poisons were an open secret of elite life. The line between medicine and murder was perilously thin, and the apothecary, trusted by all, knew how to cross it. And personal longing for purity, for transformation, for the divine order of things. There were whispers, even investigations. The infamous affair of the poisons in the 1670s exposed a hidden underworld beneath the Sun King's radiant court. Midwives, potion sellers, and courtly confidants were implicated in plots involving arsenic, belladonna, and love charms. Some were executed, others disappeared behind more polished doors. Even in England, similar tensions played out. Royal physicians and court chemists operated in a world of favors and intrigue. Robert Boyle, a gentleman scientist, moved fluidly between natural philosophy and courtly politics. Though best remembered for Boyle's law, he also dabbled in transmutation and the pursuit of the philosopher's stone. Like many in his time, he did not see a contradiction between experimental rigor and ancient dreams. His assistants recorded trials with acids and powders. He corresponded with alchemists across Europe, and though he wrote carefully, always guarding his reputation, one gets the sense that behind his formal manner lay a deep, he was not alone, but in public lectures, laboratories, and universities. Even Isaac Newton, the father of classical physics, maintained secret notebooks filled with alchemical speculations, diagrams of crucibles, translations of obscure manuscripts, recipes for mercury compounds, and visions of apocalyptic harmony. In these courts and academies, alchemy and chemistry entwined, like vines grown together, too long to separate cleanly. Knowledge was expanding, experiments were improving, the language was growing more precise, but the heart of it, the longing to master invisible forces, remained. By the late 1600s, apothecaries began to form guilds. Colleges of physicians grew more powerful, and chemistry began to be taught not only in private rooms. It would take another century for the mystical to fully fade or closed, but by then it had already left its imprint in the quiet cellars beneath Versailles, in the sealed books of Newton and Boyle, in the scent of rosemary oil and rosewater drifting through the corridors of nobility. Alchemy had already become chemistry. And so, as the candles dim and the laboratories fall silent, we look back once more at those who ground powders and lit flames, not only to understand the world, but to change it. And now, the fires cool, the crucibles sit empty, the powders settle in their jars, and the manuscript pages, from Alexandria's temple labs to the smoke-wreathed rooms of Jabir ibn Hayyan, through the mystic diagrams of sulfur and mercury, and finally to the perfumed halls of Versailles, we have wandered a long path through the invisible, a path not marked by explosions or bold discovery, but by quiet labor, hidden language, and the slow, deliberate movement of thought. Long before the periodic table, long before molecules and atoms could be measured, before chemical equations balanced or electrons danced in cloud-like shells, there were people who sensed, however dimly, that matter had laws, that something unseen governed the scene. What began in whispers and symbols, in dreams and myth and metaphor, eventually gave way to method, to repetition, to control. By the 18th century, the shift would quicken. Men like Antoine Lavoisier would weigh gases with precision, identify elements, define reactions. The language of fire and breath would become the language of combustion. The soul of mercury would become an electron shell. Gold from lead would become a metaphor only. The invisible forces made visible, but something always remains. Even in the laboratories of today, full of centrifuges, sealed hoods, and spectrometers, there is still a kind of wonder, still the quiet thrill of transformation, still the allure of turning one thing into another. The dream that once whispered through incense and ancient scrolls still stirs behind safety goggles and glowing monitors, because transformation is not only chemical, it is human, and the longing to see deeper, to grasp what cannot be touched, is as ancient as flame. So now, as you rest, as the mind loosens its grip on the day and slips into the soft shadows of sleep, let your thoughts drift gently through stone halls and sun-warmed gardens, through the gentle hum of distillation, the scent of crushed herbs, the slow circular motion of mortar and pestle. Let the rhythm of their lives lull you, those patient seekers of substance and truth, neither holy scientists nor holy mystics, but something in between. Let the night settle around you like old parchment, soft, fragile, familiar. The world, it seems, is always on the edge of discovery. Even in dreams. Good night.